Bonjour, c'est moi, l'histoire avec Hilbert. Et ici, je suis à le sud de la France. C'est la bataille de Gergovie dans l'Auvergne. Welcome back, guys, and if you couldn't understand that, I'm in the south of France, in the Auvergne region, at the site of the ancient Celtic Oppidum of Gergovia, or Gergovia, Gergovie, Gergovia. I'm not sure how you meant to say that in other languages, but you get the gist. It's Gergovia I'll be saying in this video. So, Gergovia, it's an oppidum. Now, what's an oppidum is the next question. Basically, an oppidum was a site where the Celts would live. It's comes around about the 1st century BC, when the Celts really develop into a more sophisticated culture. They're a bit like hill forts, which is a term a lot more people are more comfortable using, except that oppidums weren't purely for defence. In fact, there are some oppidum that have been found, or oppida, sorry, which is the singular, that have been found that had no defensive structures around it at all, so no ramparts, no walls in Switzerland, although the vast majority of them would have some form of defence. Now, what happened in an oppidum? Well, things that could be traded were produced, they were stored and traded, as well as being taken further afield. So here what's been found are amphorae of wine, tin as well was something that was found in this region, and other things would be traded along with those. Now, for any of you who are fans of the Gallic Wars, you will know that Gergovia was the site of a battle and a siege between Vercingetorix, or Vercingetorix in English, and Julius Caesar, Julius Caesar. Many of you will know him as. Now, this was in fact a victory for the Gauls, for Vercingetorix, and as such, there has been a monument that's been constructed in honour of this victory, because a lot of modern French see this as a victory of their ancestors against the Romans and the invaders. Now, I'll be exploring the site here, which was the site of a battle as well as a thriving town, or oppidum, and I really hope you enjoy this video. So, I'll see you soon. And from up here we can see the massive tactical advantage that being on the Gergovia plateau gave Vercingetorix and Caesar, which was why both of them wanted to be up here. You can see absolutely miles into the distance. You can also understand why the Celts would build an oppidum here, which was a centre for trade. You know, things would be built that could be traded, things were traded, they were stored, this kind of thing. It was really the centre of authority among the Gauls, the tribe being the Arverni in this region. Here you can see the capital of the Auvergne region, which is named after the Arverni tribe, Clermont-Ferrand. Now, these humps and bumps that you can see before me are what remains of the Gallic Temple. The Gallic Temple was a little further away from the rest of the oppidum where the people were living, because they believed that things that were sacred and religious should be separate from where people were living. Now, in this temple what went on is a bit of a mystery. We know that the Gauls had a druidic class of elite religious figures, that they had a hand in politics, in declaring war, and then in the peace process, making them very influential, powerful figures. We're quite certain that animals were sacrificed here. Not so sure about people. No remains have been found, and it seems to have been more of a Germanic tradition as we go into the 1st century BC. The remains of animals here that have been found are of pigs, cows, dogs, that kind of thing, that they would have been sacrificed and eaten here in ceremonial banquets. And as you can see today, it's very peaceful up here on the plateau of Gergovia. So here we are, half an hour later. I've reached the western rampart of the wall, where they have successfully rebuilt, or I think actually re-excavated, part of the wall that used to run around the oppidum. The oppidum's actually built on a large volcano. Well, it's obviously a dormant volcano, and it's a very large plateau, which is why you can see all the way around and makes it ideal for building an oppidum. Now, the type of wall we see in front of us is called the Murus Gallicus in Latin, which means the Gallic Wall, or the Gaulish Wall. Note when I'm saying Gallic here, I don't mean Gallic or Gaelic like in Scotland or Ireland. I mean Gallic as in the Gauls Gallic. And this kind of wall is very popular in this region. You had different types of construction that they would use for defending hill forts in Oppidum, such as the Kelheim type of wall, which is more prominent in Germany and Switzerland and that kind of thing. But in most of modern day France and Belgium, I think as well, the Murus Gallicus is the one that's most popular. Now, if we take a closer look at this wall, you can see a bit more about the construction. So first of all, you have here the stones, and now I hope you can see this, but there's lots of rocks just pretty much piled on top of each other, one over the other. But then what there would have been back in the day would have been a slight rampart behind, probably earth, maybe some debris, rubble, that kind of thing, just to give it a bit more structure, give it a bit more substance behind here. It also meant that people defending here could throw javelins, buckets of stuff over the wall, rocks, that kind of thing, slings, to halt anyone trying to get in on the western side. Now I'm just going to climb up over this wall and try not to break my ankles. There we go. And as you can see here, it's quite thick. Now, if we look down here, it's very steep going down. Beautiful countryside. But if we look down here, they would have had a ramp down here as well, which you can actually sort of see. I hope you can see this as well as I can. That there's a ramp and there's the road actually. But you can see right down there with the car passing how steep this is, and I think you should be able to see here, but then right the way going down here there was a ramp, which makes it more difficult, especially if you're trying to besiege this place. Now obviously the walls in the times of the Gauls would have been bigger, so they would have been taller. You've got the wall, but you've also got, it's on top of a hill. It's not a hill fort, but Oppidum and hill fort, you can sort of say they are the same sort of thing. They're usually built on a hill, a place where you can easily defend. Oppidums are more sort of trading centres, but the Gauls weren't stupid. They knew that people would try and take Oppidum from them, mostly the other tribes, but they would obviously build defences as well. So actually up here you can see quite how well defendable this place is, which is why Vercingetorix and Caesar both tried to take this position, because it was key to holding the area. From up here you can see right the way around, 360 degrees, see movements right around the valleys. And in these forests down here, I imagine it wouldn't look too different back in the time of Vercingetorix and Caesar. Probably a bit more forest, although there are a large amount of forests still in this region. There would have been some places that would have been felled for agriculture, but I think they would be further back on the eastern side of the Oppidum rather than on this western side. So I think it's highly likely that in the forests down there the Gauls would have hunted. Now at the western gate, which is just along from the western rampart. So in the time of the Gauls, you have to imagine that they would have had walls like the ones we've just seen on the western rampart all the way around here. So these, I would imagine, would be a bit bigger. They're right next to the gate, so they've got to be strong to protect the gate and obviously everyone inside the Oppidum from besieging armies. Now here we have where the gate would actually have been. Here, I'm not sure if there would have been a real gatehouse. It's possible, but I'm not really sure. I think these would have been some sort of buildings to protect, obviously, the gate from anyone trying to get inside the Oppidum that the Gauls didn't want inside. It's also this gate through which Vercingetorix sent his men when the Romans, or well actually mule drivers disguised as legionnaires, came up this way, and down that path there they sortied from Gergovia and attacked the Romans and gave them a crushing defeat. So this is where the Battle of Gergovia actually happened. It started off as a siege. Caesar and his legions were trying to cross the river here, the Allier, and Vercingetorix and his Gallic army were on the other side of the river, the side that Caesar wanted to get to, and were basically blocking him from crossing, and burning all the land there, scorched earth policy, and burning all the bridges, that kind of thing, so that Caesar couldn't get over with his legions. But Caesar, being the wily old goat that he is, decided that he'd send, in the middle of the night, a smaller army and make it look like his larger army north. Vercingetorix took the bait and went north, while actually his real army did cross the river and managed to besiege Gergovia, which is here. Now, Vercingetorix doubled back and sent envoys over to the Eudi tribe, who were allied with the Romans, and the Eudi broke with the Romans after Vercingetorix told them that the Romans had killed hostages of the tribe, which may or may not be true considering it's coming from Caesar, so we should take it with a pinch of salt, maybe a tad more than a pinch. But anyway, Vercingetorix comes here, finds the Roman army which was besieging it, and this is sort of the prelude to the battle. Now, what actually happened was that Caesar set up a large camp, sort of over there, sort of, I think, around about there. So there you can see it's nice and level down in the valley. That's where Caesar built his large camp, his main military camp for the siege of this Oppidum. Now, then Caesar decided, when Vercingetorix came with his larger Gallic army on this hill, so outside the walls of the Oppidum and inside the Oppidum, Caesar decided to build another camp, a smaller camp, over there. Well, actually that's not quite correct. The Gauls had a smaller camp there, and Caesar sent several legions over there and captured this smaller camp, which I think, if I'm correctly remembering this, is down there, sort of where that village is now. You can see there's a little rise in the landscape there, and that is where Caesar took the Gallic camp. So now Caesar has two camps, and being Caesar, he's quite good at sieges. So what he does is, in between the places of his camp, so now he's got the smaller Gallic camp, which he's captured from the Gauls, and his large siege camp, he builds two ditches or ramparts. At the later Battle of Alatia, you see as well that Caesar's very clever when it comes to siegecraft, and actually outmaneuvers and defeats Vercingetorix. But for now, he just builds these two palisades to stop the Gauls from splitting his force in half. Because if you imagine, the Gauls could sally out of the western gate, which is just to my right a few hundred meters, and cut them in half right down there. Caesar's big camp's there, small camp there, and the Gauls could cut them in half and defeat them piecemeal. So to stop this from happening, he builds this palisade. Then, for the real Battle of Gergovia, what Caesar did was he sent, I think there were mule drivers, or people who were driving sort of the wagons and things that the army needed. He disguised them as legionnaires and sent them this way. So he sent them up this way, and the western port, which we've just seen, is where Vercingetorix sent his soldiers to go into battle with these mule drivers, because obviously the Gauls from up here couldn't tell that they were just mule drivers disguised as legionnaires. They thought, oh, this is the big attack coming. But in reality, Caesar sent his legionnaires up this way, so right up to attack the Oppidum from here. Now, the battle's a bit blurry as to what actually happened, but there's a few points that we can be fairly certain of. First of all is that Caesar sent his cavalry up here and the Gauls sent their cavalry, and they would have fought somewhere down here, down in this. It's wooded now, but I imagine it would have been clear, or at least partially clear in the time of the actual battle. So that's where a large fight would have happened. Now, another thing that happened during the battle is that Caesar sent his Celtic allies from his big camp, which remember is just down there, and he sent them over this way. But the Roman legionnaires, who attacked after the cavalry down this centre, thought, oh no, there's Celts coming, and they didn't realise that they were Roman allies, so there was confusion. Now, Vercingetorix sallies out of the fortress here and defeats the smaller army down here, down in the centre, as panic is reigning. However, Caesar does regain the initiative and pulls his forces out, before it becomes too disastrous a defeat. However, in the battle it's said that 700 legionnaires lost their lives and over 6,000 men were wounded. However, the Gauls also lost a large amount of men. So now I'm on the southeastern side of the Oppidum's ramparts, outside the actual Oppidum, looking at the defences. And although they're quite overgrown now, back in the day they would have been a lot bigger. And a lot more worrying for besieging troops to come up. It wouldn't have been overgrown like this, although even overgrown you can see how much of an obstacle this would have been. Now, I'm not quite sure, but I believe that at the Oppidum of Gergovia they also had a ditch in a rampart. So obviously the ramparts, these look like ramparts now, but back in the time of the Gauls these would have been walls. A bit like this one, except obviously not quite as overgrown and more of an obstacle to besieging armies. However, as I said, they might have had ditches as well. So on over here, this sort of area, it's quite flat. I'm not sure how well my cameramanship is displaying this, but it's quite flat here, which I think means that there would have been some sort of construction here, maybe some ditches, that kind of thing, just to make it a little bit harder for an attacker, making it easier for a defender to throw a javelin, a rock, or fire an arrow or a sling at them as they're trying to climb up these walls. Actually, a very little reconstruction of what I was just explaining on the western rampart, how they would have built a little sort of rampart behind the actual walls. You can see this little bit that just slopes up, just giving this wall a little bit more substance, a little bit more stability, making it a little bit stronger. This is a little model of the battlefield and of the surrounding area around Gergovia. Now, this big, thick line represents the Allier River. And yeah, there it is, Allier, which is the biggest river in this region and was the river that Caesar was trying to cross, and Vercingetorix was preventing him from crossing by burning the bridges and manning the fords, that kind of thing, which led up to this battle and the siege of Gergovia. Now here we see Gergovia, obviously on top of a large hill, on top of the dormant volcano. And you can see it's a great position to defend, even just on this map, but even just looking out, you can see right into the distance, right around as well, 360 degrees, easily defendable, easy to see any enemies coming up on you. It's a brilliant place. So here we can have a look at the positions. So here's Gergovia, which was the Oppidum, which is where Vercingetorix and his troops would have been stationed. Now, Le Petit Camp de César, Caesar's smaller camp, which was a Gallic camp until his legionnaires took it, would have been there. So I imagine that, as I said in the previous little segment, would be somewhere sort of over there. I think about there. Now, back here we have the Grand Camp de César, which is Caesar's large camp, so his main military camp, which would have been, I imagine, around about, I think about here, about sort of, you can see the motorway there, right in the fields behind the motorway. I think that's where his large camp would have been. And the battle would have taken place somewhere in between the two, which would be just about on this slope.